All right. Well, as you can hear in my voice, I'm a bit under the weather today. I have a cold, which is somewhat unusual and novel for me. I don't generally get ill these days anymore, and because of the fact that I haven't really been ill for decades, um, getting a cold is somewhat like the taste of Madeline to Proust for me. That is, it recalls memories of much earlier times, and you know I've been having intense memories of these other cold moments that I can remember in the past, and some of them belong to the duration of time, you know, in which I spent at the University of California at San Diego, and some of them belong to a further distant childhood in the 70s and memories of the late 60s. But nevertheless, you know, I thought I would do some work today, and you know, because I'm an artist and a writer, that work entails, you know, creating different types of representation, and this will be a verbal representation. Now, just about a year ago, I had done a piece which begins with either a mishearing of two sets of misidentification. First is a misremembering in which I had misremembered the grammatical structure and the conceptual terms under which Charles Bernstein asked Bob Perlman a question about Chelsea. And he actually asked a question about what Bob Perlman thought of Chelsea as a neighborhood to live in. But I thought it was a much more abstract question. I had misremembered it as a much more abstract question. What do you think about Chelsea? And the open-endedness of the question struck me as being potentially generative, a potentially generative open-ended question that one could respond to in, you know, perhaps a number of different, you know, poetic modes. And then that was the first aspect of misidentification, was the misremembering. And then the second aspect of misidentification belonged to the set that you could refer to as, you know, misperceiving. And I couldn't make out whether Bob Perlman's response involved this word, and he responded sort of out of sync with the question, and and so the manner in which Bob Perlman's response was a non sequitur, it seemed to me intentional, and perhaps, you know, spoke to the discourse concerning you know, the preference for metonymy and bless you, and parapraxis, you know, over metaphor, and hypotaxis. And I think that you know, that distinction as a, you know, a set of poetic choices is first, you know, discussed in Roman Jakobson. You know, I may be wrong, but at least that's what I remember. But that you know, is often evoked in certain, you know, circles of contemporary poetry as belonging to you know, the values or ideology that, you know, particular groups or communities of poets belong to, and and who define themselves, by certain kinds of preferences. But then, which is interesting, because then the other part of the misidentification that belongs to the misperception of the word that so he makes this move, right, which is this non sequitur move that belongs to this discourse domain of metonymy and parapraxis and collage, and then, but within that move, then he, talks about thinking and enters a kind of, different, discursive domain, and talks about, terms that, recently he's been thinking about that in relationship to this notion of the avant-garde, and that's where I misremember, or not misremember. This is where I can't determine what the word is that he's saying, whether it's regression, aggression, or regression, aggression, or DigRession. I believe it's one of those three, but perhaps there are other possibilities, and perhaps I'm still misremembering it. Well, I wouldn't be misremembering my misidentification or inability, to define this word, but perhaps the limits of my imagination, didn't allow me to imagine other possibilities for this word that was difficult for me to perceive in its in the acoustic clarity necessary to identify it as a determinate term. So that was interesting to me, that it makes this, his response makes this non sequitur move that belongs to this discourse, in a certain sense, on collage. But then once he makes the move, that he starts producing more of a kind of narrative or interrogative, strategy, right, and that involves thinking about conceptualization, right, and how one's ideas change over time. So I had responded to that set of phenomenological difficulties that I was having in making a determinate sense regarding the selection of those words, and also engaging the failure of my memory to recall the exact question that it was that Charles Bernstein asked the poet Perlman. So I produced a poem. It was improvisational, and the strategy in that one was to recall the strategy of a poem by Robert Calvert, the poet and singer, occasional singer, for the band Hawkwind, and this poem that he has 10 seconds of forever, which he counts down the seconds of forever and remembers or produces what he's imagining in these seconds down to one, and I did this with Chelsea, so we had a countdown beginning with the 10th second of Chelsea. So I thought today I would evoke a different strategy, and it may or may not work out, as you can hear clearly from the tone and timbre of my voice, that I'm as I mentioned before, under the weather, and I suppose the misremembering of the question that Charles Bernstein posed in that brief segment in which he asked Bob Perlman, Bob, how do you like Chelsea as a neighborhood to live in, which I misremembered as, Bob, what do you think of Chelsea, right? I remembered it much more abstractly. I suppose perhaps this Proustian effect that this cold is producing upon me is drawing me once again to these considerations of memory and misremembering and what inspires memory, and how we're drawn by aspects of one could say the energies, right, of the unconscious to certain moments, and those energies, Freud and Jung would, insist are often hidden, but and the way of their emergent potentiality, right, reaching us in the conscious, domain in which, largely we share our thoughts, right, often produces, distortions or transformations that, that require a certain amount of work to recover. And so I was thinking about, all of that, and, what words that sound like digression and regression and aggression, that I might have, failed to imagine, were possibilities for this response. Anyway, I thought today that because I was thinking about memory and all of this, and as I said, this was about a year ago, I also thought of this particular, piece, perhaps, less inspired by the production of, what this cold is offering me as, more distant memories, but my response to what this cold is offering me as distant memories, thinking about remembering itself. Excuse me. And so what I thought I would do is, a different kind of poem, and this perhaps, this improvisation perhaps requires an apology or a disclaimer in advance. What I'd like to do is compose anagrammatical poems, spelling out the word Chelsea, and do it improvisationally. I haven't actually read any of these. I haven't read any of these poems. I typed into a Google search against my better judgment, Chelsea poems, and I have options here. I have Chelsea poems about football, love, word. That's interesting. That would be the language version, I guess. And more football poems. Wow, there's really a lot of football poems about Chelsea. Thaw, meaning, and national poetry. Amazon. It's kind of interesting. So we could go the commercial route. We've been talking about commercials a lot, so we could go that route. But I like just, the general abstract Chelsea poems, since I began with these memories of misremembering a question in this abstract way. So what I'd like to do is compose these poems, beginning with lines beginning with the first letters of all the letters that belong to this word Chelsea. So the first line would begin with C, and then when I exhaust, what sounds good for a line, I'll just move on to the next one, and this will either work or it won't. And but I really like working this way and coming up with a kind of means of working, but then performing it as improvisatory engagement, and whatever results, and if it's good, it's good, and then we can keep it, and if it's not, we can throw it out later. We'll probably keep it no matter what. Let's see if we can get there. All right. Could never discover a word that could cover the well-traveled miles. Horizon, you have no reason to warm. The sun above, a memory. Easter, death keeps a hole in the ground. Lay inside Chelsea's heart and understand her love. S is for your sweet smile, a special, splendid sight. A week you helped to keep our streets clean during this quarantine. 2. Conclusion to each day, I envision you in all that I do. Had magic behind her eyelids, free running through her veins. Entire life, and it's only been a mere fraction of it. L is for lovely. Starts each morning the conclusion to each day. I envision you in all that I do and everything I say. Experiences of being a mother and a child paralleling one another. And over again, dot, dot, dot. 3. Can remember I've written my thoughts in journals and notebooks. Hair ran across the road. One of us pointed to it with his hand. Even more true. Anyway, I want what I do. Living this life, but for some reason, said that my queef sounded like the end of a ketchup bottle, and I somehow felt happy about that. Enough to multiply in my womb where our daughter died when I was afraid to be touched. Astro poems and vertical group exercises